Have you ever gazed into the vast night sky, where stars shimmer like whispers of eternity, and wondered how justice unfolds in a world so intricately designed yet seemingly chaotic? Look around and you'll see a tapestry of human stories, some brimming with triumph, others steeped in suffering. Yet, at the heart of it all lies a profound truth. God's justice, though often unseen and misunderstood, is neither absent nor arbitrary. It moves like the tides, silent but unstoppable, shaping destinies and correcting wrongs in ways that defy human comprehension. Consider for a moment the delicate balance of creation. Every sunrise, every season, and every heartbeat testifies to a divine order, a justice that ensures that chaos never triumphs over harmony. Yet in the midst of this divine balance, how often do we question the fairness of life? We see the wicked prosper while the righteous falter. We endure trials that seem undeserved and watch as injustices go unanswered. In such moments it is easy to cry out, "Where is God's justice? Where is His hand in my struggle?" But here lies the mystery of His justice. It operates on a plane far beyond human understanding. It is not confined to the limitations of time or our perception of fairness. It is as eternal as the one who enacts it, working not merely to punish or reward, but to redeem, restore, and elevate. His justice is not a tool of vengeance, but a masterpiece of grace, a grace that turns wounds into wisdom and trials into triumphs. Now pause and reflect. Have you ever faced a moment of despair so deep that you questioned your very purpose? Have you carried the weight of betrayal, failure, or loss and wondered why a just God would allow such pain? These questions, though heavy, are not signs of doubt but invitations to trust. They beckon us to look deeper, to seek the hand of God in the shadows where His justice often begins its quiet, transformative work. Imagine a sculptor chiseling away at a block of marble. To the untrained eye, the process may seem destructive, of violent breaking of the stone. Yet to the sculptor, every strike is purposeful, every chip intentional, working toward the unveiling of a masterpiece. So it is with God's justice in your life. What feels like loss or hardship is often His way of shaping you into something greater than you could ever imagine. He sees the masterpiece when all we see are the broken pieces. His justice is also deeply personal. It is not a one-size-fits-all decree, but a tailor-made intervention in your life. It seeks not only to address wrongs done to you, but also to refine your character, strengthen your faith, and prepare you for a greater calling. It is the justice of a loving Father who disciplines not out of anger, but out of love, who allows challenges not to harm you, but to elevate you. And yet, God's justice is not limited to your individual story. It weaves together the lives of countless others, creating a grand narrative where even the smallest acts of righteousness and faithfulness ripple across eternity. Your trials are not isolated events, but threads in a larger tapestry, where your perseverance and trust in His justice contribute to a greater good that you may never fully see this side of heaven. So the question remains, are you willing to trust in a justice that does not always reveal itself immediately? Are you willing to believe that every tear, every prayer, and every act of faith is seen by a God whose justice is not only perfect, but also perfectly timed? If you are, then you will come to see that His justice is not a burden but a blessing, not a punishment but a promise. As we journey together through this exploration of God's justice, let us uncover the ways in which His hand works in your favor, not merely to settle scores or right wrongs, but to bring you closer to His purpose and to reveal His glory through your life. Let us embrace the profound truth that His justice is not only for you but also within you, shaping you into a reflection of His divine goodness. God's timing is perfect. Have you ever found yourself standing at the edge of frustration, wondering why your prayers seem unanswered? Why the justice you seek feels delayed, as though heaven itself has gone silent? It is in these moments of waiting that the human heart is tested, stretched, and often burdened with doubt. Yet what we perceive as delay is not denial, it is preparation. God's timing, though beyond our comprehension, is never flawed. It is perfect, purposeful, and precise, orchestrating events in a way that serves a far greater plan than we could ever imagine. Think of the sunrise. No matter how dark the night, the morning never rushes. It arrives exactly when it is meant to, illuminating the world with a brilliance that reminds us of God's faithfulness. In the same way, His justice comes not a moment too soon nor a moment too late. It arrives at the precise time when its impact will be most profound, when your heart is ready to receive it, and when its ripple effects will resonate in ways you could never foresee. God's timing is not confined by the ticking of clocks or the turning of calendars. It operates on an eternal scale, where every moment is interconnected with His divine purpose. Imagine a symphony where each instrument must play its part at the exact right time to create harmony. If even one note is out of sync, the beauty of the music is lost. So it is with God's justice. Every detail of your life is woven into His grand design, and His timing ensures that nothing falls out of place. But let us be honest, waiting for God's justice can feel agonizing. When the weight of injustice presses down on your soul, it is natural to cry out, "Why, Lord? How much longer must I endure this?" Yet in those moments of waiting, God is working. He is aligning people, circumstances, and opportunities to ensure that His justice not only vindicates you but also transforms you. His delay is not neglect. It is His careful craftsmanship, shaping your life into a testimony of His glory. Consider the story of Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. To the human eye, it seemed as though justice had abandoned him. Years passed, and yet God's hand was at work. Each moment of hardship was a step toward His ultimate destiny. When the time was right, not a moment earlier, Joseph was elevated to a position of power, not only to fulfill his own dreams, but to save a nation. This is the nature of God's timing. It not only addresses your present pain, but also prepares you for a future purpose that is greater than you could ever conceive. Ask yourself, are you willing to trust in a justice that may not come on your schedule but is guaranteed to come on God's? Can you surrender your need for immediate answers to the one who sees the end from the beginning? The truth is, our impatience often blinds us to the beauty of what God is doing behind the scenes. We want results now, but God wants transformation. He is not merely interested in resolving your circumstances. He is committed to refining your character. God's perfect timing is not just about fixing what is wrong. It is about creating something right, something that could only be born out of the waiting. In those moments of uncertainty, He is teaching you patience, building your faith, and preparing your heart to receive His blessings with gratitude and humility. The waiting is not wasted. Every second is a part of His divine plan, designed to deepen your dependence on Him and strengthen your resolve to walk in His ways. So when you feel the ache of delay, remember this: God is not idle. His silence is not absence. His timing is not random. He is working all things together for your good and His glory. Trust in the one who holds time in His hands, and you will see that His justice is not only perfect, it is beautifully, divinely, and overwhelmingly in your favor. He transforms suffering into strength. Suffering is a universal experience. No one is immune to pain, loss, or hardship. Yet for those who trust in God's justice, suffering is not the end, it is the beginning of transformation. The trials you face are not meant to break you, but to build you. Not to destroy you, but to refine you into something greater. This is the paradox of God's justice. What seems like punishment is often preparation, and what feels like defeat is the groundwork for your ultimate victory. Consider for a moment the process of refining gold. The precious metal is placed into a blazing furnace, where the heat is nearly unbearable. To the untrained eye, it might appear that the gold is being destroyed, but to the skilled refiner, the fire serves a purpose. It removes impurities, leaving the gold purer and more valuable than before. So it is with suffering in the hands of God. The fires of hardship are not meant to consume you, but to cleanse you, removing the doubts, fears, and weaknesses that hold you back from your divine purpose. When you endure suffering, it is easy to question God's justice. Why me, you may ask? Why am I facing these trials when I have been faithful? But this question, as painful as it is, carries within it an invitation to trust. It beckons you to lean not on your understanding, but on God's promises, which assure you that He works all things for the good of those who love Him. Your suffering is not meaningless. It is a tool in the hands of a loving Father who sees what you cannot, the strength that lies within you waiting to be revealed. Look at the life of Job, a man who endured unimaginable loss. He lost his wealth, his health, and his family, and yet through his suffering, God's justice was revealed in a way that transformed not only Job's life, but the lives of those who witnessed his restoration. Job's suffering was not the end of his story, it was the path to a deeper understanding of God's faithfulness and a greater blessing than he had ever known. This is the essence of God's justice. It turns your pain into a platform for His glory and your growth. Think of your own life. What have you endured that seemed unbearable at the time? Perhaps it was the loss of a loved one, the betrayal of a friend, or the failure of a dream. Yet, if you look back, can you see how those experiences shaped you? How they taught you resilience, compassion, and faith? This is the transformative power of suffering when placed in God's hands. It becomes not a weight that crushes you, but a tool that strengthens you, preparing you for the blessings and responsibilities that lie ahead. Suffering also connects you to the heart of God in a profound way. When you face trials, you share in the sufferings of Christ, who endured the ultimate injustice so that you might know the depth of His love. Your pain becomes a sacred offering, drawing you closer to the one who bore all pain for your sake. And as you lean into His strength, you find that you are not only able to endure, but to emerge stronger, wiser, and more faithful than before. Remember, God's justice does not eliminate suffering, it transforms it. It takes the ashes of your pain and creates beauty. It takes your tears and waters the seeds of hope and perseverance. Trust in His process, and you will see that your suffering is not wasted. It is the foundation upon which God builds a life of purpose, strength, and victory. He restores what was lost. In the journey of life, loss is inevitable. We lose time, relationships, opportunities, and even parts of ourselves to the trials and tribulations we face. But here is the beauty of God's justice. What is lost is never lost forever. He is a God of restoration, and His justice ensures that what was taken unjustly will be returned, not merely in equal measure, but in abundance. When we think of restoration, our minds often go to material things, money, possessions, or positions. But God's justice goes far deeper. He restores not only what you had, but what you are. He heals the wounds of the heart, repairs the brokenness of the spirit, and renews the dreams that seemed shattered beyond repair. His restoration is not about returning you to who you were, it is about transforming you into who you are meant to be. Consider the story of Ruth, a woman who lost her husband, her home, and her future in the wake of tragedy. By all appearances, her life was over. But God's justice was at work, weaving a story of restoration that would not only redeem Ruth, but also place her in the lineage of Christ Himself. Through her loyalty, faith, and perseverance, Ruth found not only a new beginning, but a legacy that would echo through eternity. This is the power of God's restoration. It takes what was meant to harm you and turns it into a blessing beyond your wildest dreams. Loss often leaves us feeling empty, as though a piece of ourselves has been stolen. But God's justice does not leave voids unfilled. He promises to restore the years that the locusts have eaten, to replace mourning with joy, and to turn despair into praise. His justice is not passive, it actively works to replenish, renew, and revive. And while the restoration may not come in the form we expect, it always comes in the form we need. Take a moment to reflect. What have you lost that feels irreparable? Perhaps it was a relationship that ended abruptly, a career path that was derailed, or a season of life that slipped away too quickly. Now imagine the God who created the universe stepping into your story, gathering the broken pieces, and crafting something new and beautiful. This is not a fantasy, it is the promise of His justice, a justice that never forgets, never overlooks, and never leaves His children in despair. God's restoration is also a testimony to others. When people see what He has done in your life, how He has brought you out of loss and into abundance, it becomes a beacon of hope. It declares to the world that no loss is beyond His reach, no situation too hopeless for His touch. Your restoration becomes a reflection of His glory, a living proof of His justice at work. So hold on to hope. What was taken from you unjustly will be returned, not merely as it was, but transformed, multiplied, and sanctified by the hands of the one who makes all things new. Trust in His justice, and you will see that your loss is not the end of your story, it is the beginning of His restoration. He protects the righteous. In a world where chaos seems to reign and injustice often appears to have the upper hand, it is easy to feel vulnerable, as though righteousness offers no shield against the storms of life. Yet, the justice of God assures us that His hand is ever upon those who walk in His ways. His protection, though often unseen, is constant, unyielding, and divinely tailored to guard His children. Imagine a fortress built on the highest hill, its walls impenetrable and its foundations unshakable. That fortress is God's protection for the righteous. No matter how fierce the storm or how relentless the enemy, those who seek refuge in Him are kept safe, not necessarily from the trials of life, but through them. His protection doesn't promise a life free from challenges, rather, it ensures that those challenges will never overcome you. Consider the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Betrayed and condemned for his faithfulness to God, Daniel faced what seemed to be certain death. Yet God's justice intervened in a way that defied human understanding. He shut the mouths of the lions, protecting Daniel not only physically but also spiritually, proving to all that His justice is a shield for those who remain steadfast in righteousness. This divine protection wasn't just about saving Daniel's life, it was a testimony to God's sovereignty and faithfulness. How often have you faced situations that felt like a lion's den? Perhaps it was a betrayal by someone you trusted, a workplace conflict, or a personal trial that seemed insurmountable. In those moments, did you sense a presence greater than your fear, a peace that surpassed understanding? That was God's protection at work, shielding your spirit, even as the world around you seemed to crumble. God's protection for the righteous is not always about visible rescue. Sometimes it is about inner fortitude, the strength to endure, the courage to stand firm, and the grace to rise above. He guards not only your body but also your soul, ensuring that no weapon formed against you shall prosper. His justice surrounds you like a shield, turning attacks into opportunities for growth and proving that no harm can touch you without His permission. His protection is also proactive, often preventing dangers we are not even aware of. How many accidents were avoided, how many traps dismantled, and how many unseen threats neutralized because of His unseen hand? We may never fully know this side of heaven, how often God's justice intervened on our behalf, shielding us from harm we never even realized was near. Reflect on the words of the psalmist, "The Lord is my rock, my fortress and my deliverer, my God is my rock, in whom I take refuge." This declaration is not just poetic, it is a powerful truth for every believer. When you walk in righteousness, God's justice ensures that no force of darkness can overcome His light within you. So, when you feel vulnerable, remember this: you are not alone. The God of justice is your protector, your shield, and your refuge. No trial can extinguish the light of His presence, and no enemy can thwart His plan for your life. His protection is your assurance that righteousness is not a burden but a blessing, a path guarded by the one who holds all power in His hands. He elevates the humble. The world celebrates pride, ambition, and self-promotion, yet God's justice operates on an entirely different principle. It is not the proud or the powerful who are lifted high in His kingdom, but the humble, those who trust in His plan, submit to His will, and seek His glory above their own. God's justice ensures that humility is never overlooked, and in due time, He elevates the humble to positions of honor and influence. Humility is not weakness, it is strength under control. It is the recognition that every blessing, every success, and every victory comes not from our own efforts but from the hand of God. To be humble is to live in the truth that we are nothing without Him but can do all things through Him. And it is this posture of surrender that invites God's justice to work mightily in your favor. Think of David, the shepherd boy who was anointed king. At the time of his anointing, David had no throne, no army, and no earthly power. Yet his heart was humble, fully trusting in God's timing and justice. He did not seize the throne by force, but waited patiently, even when others sought to destroy him. In the end, God's justice elevated him not because of his status or strength, but because of his humility before the Lord. In your own life, you may feel overlooked, undervalued, or forgotten. Perhaps you have labored in obscurity, doing the right thing when no one else noticed. Yet God sees every act of faithfulness, every quiet moment of humility, and every decision to place His will above your own. His justice ensures that your humility will not go unrewarded. In His perfect timing, He will lift you up not for your own glory but for His. God's elevation is not just about outward success, it is about inward transformation. When He lifts the humble, He also fills them with wisdom, grace and strength to fulfill the purpose He has set before them. His justice works not only to place you in positions of influence, but also to prepare your heart to handle that influence with integrity and faithfulness. Remember the words of Jesus, "Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted." This is the justice of God, a justice that turns the values of the world upside down, where the last become first, and the meek inherit the earth. It is a justice that honors humility as the foundation of true greatness. So, if you find yourself in a season of waiting, trust that God's justice is at work. Your humility is not in vain, it is the soil in which He plants seeds of future greatness. When the time is right, He will lift you higher than you could ever lift yourself, proving once again that His ways are higher than ours, and that His justice always works in favor of those who walk humbly with Him. He uses injustice for good. Injustice is one of life's most challenging experiences. When we encounter betrayal, loss, or unfair treatment, our natural reaction is to cry out, "Why, God? Why would you allow this to happen?" The pain of injustice cuts deep, leaving scars that seem irreparable. Yet, in the divine economy of God's justice, even the most profound injustices are not wasted. What others intend for harm, God transforms into something good, something redemptive, and something that glorifies Him. When you are wronged, it is easy to feel abandoned. It can seem as though the heavens are silent and that God's justice has forgotten you. But Scripture assures us that God is not indifferent to your suffering. His justice is always at work, even in the darkest circumstances, orchestrating a greater good that often goes beyond our immediate understanding. The story of Joseph, the beloved son of Jacob, is a profound testament to this truth. Joseph's life was riddled with injustice. His brothers, consumed by jealousy, sold him into slavery, tearing him away from his family and homeland. As if that weren't enough, he was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit. By all appearances, Joseph's life was a tragic tale of injustice upon injustice. But God's hand was at work in every step of his journey. Each trial, each betrayal was a piece of the puzzle that would ultimately reveal God's divine plan. In the midst of his suffering, Joseph remained faithful, trusting in the justice of a God who sees all, knows all, and wastes nothing. When the time was right, God elevated Joseph from the depths of prison to the heights of power, making him second only to Pharaoh in Egypt. Through this position, Joseph was able to save not only the nation of Egypt, but also his own family, the very brothers who had betrayed him. In a moment of divine reconciliation, Joseph told them, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Genesis 50:20. This is the heart of God's justice. It transforms injustice into a platform for redemption. Reflect on your own life. How often have you faced situations where the actions of others caused you pain, loss, or hardship? Perhaps it was a betrayal by someone you trusted deeply, an opportunity stolen from you, or words spoken against you that tarnished your reputation. In those moments, it is easy to focus on the hurt, to dwell on the unfairness of it all. But God's justice invites you to lift your eyes above the pain and to trust in His ability to bring good out of even the darkest circumstances. God's justice is not about erasing the injustice, but about redeeming it. He takes what was meant to harm you and uses it to shape your character, deepen your faith, and prepare you for the blessings He has in store. The very things that were meant to break you become the foundation for your breakthrough. Your scars become a testament to His healing power. Your trials a testimony to His faithfulness. Injustice also serves to draw you closer to God. When you are wronged, you are invited into the fellowship of Christ's sufferings. Jesus Himself endured the ultimate injustice. Betrayed by one of His closest followers, falsely accused by those He came to save, and crucified for sins He did not commit, Christ's life was the epitome of unfairness. Yet, through His suffering, God accomplished the greatest act of justice the world has ever known, the redemption of humanity. When you face injustice, you are reminded that you serve a Savior who understands your pain and walks with you through it. God's justice also works through injustice to fulfill His greater purposes. What you endure is not just about you, it is about the role you play in His divine plan. Your trials may be the catalyst for someone else's salvation, the seed of hope for another's faith, or the spark that ignites a greater movement of His glory. Just as Joseph's suffering saved an entire nation, your perseverance through injustice can have a ripple effect that extends far beyond what you can see. One of the most challenging aspects of trusting in God's justice is the element of timing. The good He brings out of injustice may not be immediately apparent. It may take months, years, or even a lifetime to fully understand how He has redeemed your pain. But the promise remains, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Romans 8:28. This is not a vague hope, but a guaranteed truth for those who place their trust in Him. How should you respond to injustice? First, release the desire for revenge. Vengeance belongs to the Lord, and His justice is far more perfect than anything you could enact. Second, lean into His presence. Pour out your heart to Him in prayer, trusting that He hears and sees your pain. Finally, live with expectancy. Look for the ways He is working behind the scenes, and trust that His justice will prevail in ways that exceed your imagination. Injustice, when placed in the hands of God, becomes a tool for transformation. It becomes the soil in which your faith grows, the furnace in which your character is refined, and the platform from which His glory is displayed. Trust in His justice, and you will find that what others intended for harm, God will use for good that blesses you, strengthens others, and magnifies His name. This is the power of His justice, a justice that never fails and always works in your favor. He honors faithfulness. Faithfulness is one of the most beautiful expressions of trust in God. It is the quiet, unwavering commitment to remain steadfast in His ways, even when circumstances seem to defy His promises. In a world that celebrates instant gratification and fleeting loyalty, faithfulness often goes unnoticed and unrewarded by human standards. But in the divine justice of God, faithfulness is never forgotten. Every act of devotion, every moment of perseverance, and every decision to honor Him is seen, treasured, and ultimately rewarded. Faithfulness begins with the small things, those daily choices that align your heart with God's will. It's choosing honesty over deception, kindness over anger, and trust over doubt. These acts may seem insignificant in the grand scheme of life, but in the eyes of God they are monumental. They are the seeds of righteousness, planted in the soil of obedience, that will one day yield a harvest of divine blessings. Consider the parable of the talents. In this story, Jesus speaks of a master who entrusts his servants with varying amounts of wealth. When he returns, he rewards those who were faithful with what they were given, saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." Matthew 25:21. This parable reveals a profound truth about God's justice. Faithfulness in the small things is the foundation for greater blessings and responsibilities in His kingdom. In your own life, think of the times you chose to remain faithful, even when it was difficult. Perhaps you kept praying when the answers didn't come, stayed committed to integrity when shortcuts seemed easier, or continued loving others even when that love wasn't returned. These moments may have felt thankless or unnoticed, but rest assured, God saw every single one. His justice ensures that no act of faithfulness is ever wasted. Faithfulness also involves trusting God when His timing doesn't align with your expectations. It's easy to be faithful when life is going well, but true faithfulness is tested in the waiting. Think of Abraham, who was promised descendants as numerous as the stars, yet waited decades before the birth of Isaac. Despite the delay, Abraham remained faithful, and God's justice honored his trust with a covenant that would bless generations to come. Your waiting, too, is not in vain. It is a sacred space where your faith is refined, and God's justice is preparing to honor your perseverance. Faithfulness is not just about what you do, it's about who you become. As you remain steadfast in His ways, God's justice transforms you from the inside out. Your character is strengthened, your spirit is fortified, and your trust in Him deepens. This inner work is as much a part of His justice as the outward rewards. He is shaping you into someone who not only receives His blessings but also reflects His glory. God's justice in honoring faithfulness often extends beyond what we can see. Sometimes the rewards are immediate: promotion at work, a healed relationship, or a breakthrough in a long-standing struggle. Other times, the rewards are eternal, stored up in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. Matthew 6:20. Whether seen or unseen, the rewards of faithfulness are always secure in the hands of God. Faithfulness also has a ripple effect. When others witness your steadfast commitment to God, even in the face of adversity, it inspires and strengthens their faith. Your faithfulness becomes a testimony to His justice, a living example of how He honors those who honor Him. Like a beacon of light, your life points others to the goodness and faithfulness of the God you serve. Think about the prophets of old, men and women who remained faithful to God's call despite overwhelming opposition. Jeremiah preached for years without seeing a single soul turn to God, yet his faithfulness left an eternal legacy. Daniel refused to bow to earthly kings, trusting in the justice of the King of Kings. Their stories remind us that God's justice does not operate on human timelines but on eternal truths. Your faithfulness, too, contributes to a story much larger than your own. It's important to remember that God's justice in honoring faithfulness doesn't mean life will be free of challenges. In fact, faithfulness often invites opposition. But the beauty of His justice is that it turns every challenge into an opportunity for growth and every trial into a testament of His sustaining grace. When you remain faithful, you declare to the world and to yourself that God is enough. His promises are sure, and His justice is worth trusting, even in the hardest seasons. Reflect on the words of Galatians 6:9, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." This is God's promise to you. The harvest is coming. The seeds you've sown in faithfulness, though buried in the soil of waiting and watered with tears, will burst forth in a season of divine abundance. And when that time comes, you will see that every moment of perseverance was worth it. So hold fast to your faith. Keep walking in obedience, even when the path is difficult. Keep trusting His promises, even when they seem delayed. And keep honoring Him in the small things, knowing that His justice will honor you in ways that exceed your greatest expectations. God's justice never forgets faithfulness, and in His perfect timing it will bring forth a reward that glorifies Him and blesses you beyond measure. As we reflect on the 7 profound ways God's justice works in your favor, it becomes clear that His justice is not merely about fairness, it is about transformation, restoration, and divine purpose. Through His perfect timing, He orchestrates every moment to align with His greater plan. He transforms suffering into strength, using pain to mold us into vessels of resilience and faith. He restores what was lost, ensuring that no wound remains unhealed and no injustice remains unanswered. He protects the righteous, guarding us with his unfailing love, even in life's fiercest storms. He elevates the humble, lifting those who trust in him to places of honor and influence. He turns injustice into a canvas for redemption, crafting beauty from the broken pieces of our lives. And finally, he honors faithfulness, rewarding every act of obedience and devotion with blessings that echo into eternity. Each of these ways reveals a glimpse of God's character, a God who is not distant or indifferent, but deeply involved in every detail of your life. His justice is not a reaction, but a reflection of his nature, a justice rooted in love, grace, and mercy. It works not only to settle scores, but to draw you closer to him, shaping you into the person he created you to be. But his justice is not something to merely observe, it is an invitation to trust. Trust that his timing is perfect, even when you cannot see the full picture. Trust that your suffering is not wasted, your losses are not permanent, and your faithfulness is not forgotten. Trust that he is working all things together for your good, even in the midst of pain and uncertainty. This trust is the foundation of a life lived in the light of his justice, a life of peace, purpose, and profound joy. As you leave this message and carry these truths with you, I encourage you to reflect on how God's justice is already at work in your life. Look for the ways he has protected, restored, and transformed you. Recognize the moments where his timing, though different from your own, proved to be perfect, and most importantly, remain faithful. Stay steadfast in his promises, knowing that his justice will never fail you. Remember, the God who holds the stars in place and commands the winds and waves also holds you in his hands. His justice is your assurance that you are never forgotten, never abandoned, and never without hope. Trust in him, walk in his ways, and watch as his justice unfolds in your favor. Thank you for allowing these words to speak into your heart today. May they inspire you to stand firm in your faith, to trust in his timing, and to live with the confidence that God's justice is always working for your good. Go forth in his peace, and may his blessings follow you all the days of your life. Amen.